On a late, foggy morning, my brother Chris and I were traveling the city bus heading to our aunt's house for Thanksgiving. We were the sole occupants of the bus, except for the bus driver, until we reached a halt. Suddenly, the door swung open, allowing the chilly outside air to enter. An older woman emerges from the fog and stands at the front of the bus. She appeared to be no older than my mother, who was in her 60s. She wore a torn, soiled cream-colored dress and had no shoes on her feet. Her hair was disheveled and wildly standing on top of her head. The varying lengths and texture made me believe it had been a while since she did anything to it. She stood in silence, gazing blankly at the driver, as he requested her $2.50 bus fare from her. No words would escape from her lips. She simply stared. He repeated his question, perhaps thinking she hadn't heard him the first time. Yet, she remained completely silent, not uttering a word. Although this exchange was brief, it rapidly escalated in intensity, causing my body to tense up noticeably. And at that moment, her head snapped into my direction. A slow, airy smile crept across her face. Her eyes widened with excitement, sending a shiver down my spine. My heart plummeted instantly, transitioning from mild tension to near panic. I've experienced strange encounters while riding the bus before, so my first instinct was to avoid eye contact and to maintain a calm demeanor. However, she started to approach me at a measured pace, and the chilly air seemed to follow her. Despite my efforts to avoid eye contact, I sensed her intense gaze and her body moving closer and closer to invade my personal space. She stopped, positioning herself right in front of me, leaving me no option but to lift my gaze to meet her unhinged, bulging eyes and freakishly wide grin. Our eyes locked, and in a soft whisper, she uttered, "I like your hair." It seemed that the bus driver had overlooked the bus fare as he promptly closed the doors and started driving without saying a word. The jolting motion of the bus didn't seem to faze her in the slightest. Quickly, frustration welled up in me as I wondered, what does she want from me? And yet, the only words I could let from my mouth were, "Thank you." Then, an uncomfortable silence. It felt like an eternity as we continued to gaze awkwardly at each other. During this time, Chris had become aware of our odd interaction.
"Can we help you?"
Chris asked grudgingly. She maintained her unwavering focus, completely disregarding him as if she didn't even notice he existed. This only heightened the sense of dread, and at this point I couldn't look away. She had me entranced, paralyzed with fear. Then she lifted her hand to reach my braids. Without hesitation, I swiftly swatted her hand away. "Don't touch me," I strongly asserted. Her unwavering stare and smile persisted. "I like your hair," was her response. Chris evidently had enough and began nudging me out of my seat, guiding me to a further spot up to the front. Although I had finally broken free from her trance, I could still feel her gaze fixed on me. I had no intentions of glancing back, and Chris refrained from doing so as well. Nevertheless, after we took our new seats, I could sense her gradually approaching us again. Despite the temptation, I refused to look back to confirm. I did not want to risk falling under her trance once more. You know that eerie feeling of someone or something lurking behind you in a dark house? You sprint down the dark hallway into your bedroom with that distressing feeling that they're closing in on you. It was that feeling that engulfed me, yet there was nowhere to escape. At that moment, the bus was still in motion. We hadn't reached our stop yet. So all I could do was sit and wait whatever laid ahead. Chris didn't portray whether he sensed her approaching or not, and for some odd reason, this terrified me even more. She continued to draw nearer and nearer. What would transpire if she actually made contact with me? I had a foreboding sense that something terrible would happen if she managed to touch me. But all I could do was bury my face in my clenched hands. Just as I sensed her icy hands inching towards my shoulders, Chris thankfully pulled the string to signal I'll stop. As the bus continued to move, I rushed to the door and turned to glance into her direction. Strangely, she hadn't budged from where we first encountered her at the back of the bus. She remained standing, her creepy grin and deranged eyes fixed on us. The bus stopped and we were finally off the bus. As the door closed and drove away, Chris and I began our walk towards our destination. The fog had dissipated. We eventually arrived at our aunt's house, and it was bursting with family members, lively conversations, genuine smiles, and warm embraces. The table was laid with a beautiful spread of almost every dish imaginable. As I sat down to savor my favorite dishes, the memory of our bus encounter gradually faded into the background. Neither Chris or I brought it up to our family members. After filling our bellies, one of our cousins suggested that a few of us go for a walk to a nearby parade taking place down the street. We all agreed to join in. While strolling down the street en route to the parade, I happened to glance to my left and spotted red and blue lights, officers in the midst of a crowd, all gathered around peering down at something. I called out to my family, urging them to come and inspect with me. We pushed our way through the crowd to see what had captured their attention. Upon reaching the center of the crowd and getting a glimpse of what they were gawking at, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the very same woman from the bus, sprawled out on the ground, her limbs flayed in every direction. Her clothes torn even more than before. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head. Her hair disheveled, mixed with dirt and the blood that was pouring out of her. There were visible markings around her neck as well. She was clearly not alive. But then I glanced up into the crowd. There she stood, gazing down at her own lifeless body. My heart sunk into my stomach once more, and I was consumed by sheer panic. Again, she slowly lifted her gaze to meet mine, but this time her eyes was filled with tears. I stood there, stunned and unable to move. Suddenly, she opened her mouth so wide it appeared otherworldly, emitting an unearthly high-pitched screech, piercing my ears. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and comment. Tell me your thoughts about the video and tell me how would you interpret this stream. Also, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next video.